Going to. Okay, welcome everybody to this month's Alternative Voting Methods Statewide Task Force meeting. Here is our agenda for today, and people are always welcome to add new things to the agenda, but this is where we'll start. You might want to read the thought for today because this is the only slide that has the thought for today if you're interested. But you'll see the rest of the agenda on other slides.
Close this, so
Okay.
he's not bothered by it.
I think Peg has her microphone on. I don't know if Pat can, a host can mute Peg maybe. Here are our meeting norms. When you signed up, you agreed to be part of a productive dialogue. Here are our minutes, quote unquote minutes from last time. We had a guest speaker, Sam Chang. We did an interesting little math problem. We talked about the November 5th results that affected electoral systems. And now we're going to do meeting introductions. And I'm going to stop sharing so we can see each other. And is there anybody who would like to lead the introduction so it's not just my voice talking the whole time?
I'll start. I'm Chris Baum, and I'm not a member of the league, and I've been interested in voting for about 8 years. That's enough.
How about Betsy, you go next, and then Tom.
Betsy McBride. I am a member of the league and been interested in this issue for a long time, but not to the level of detail that's available when you go to Celeste meetings.
My turn?
Sure, if we can let somebody else go since this is your
I'll-
first meeting or not, either way.
I'll go ahead. I'm Tom Alley. I am a recent member of the League of Women Voters. I joined in Adams County. I'm actually in Broomfield where there is no league. I'm also a founding member of the RCV for Colorado, Ranked Choice Voting for Colorado, and work in that venue to try and bring RCV to various localities and to the state. I've been doing that for about 7 years.
And you brought it to Broomfield.
Oh yeah, I helped spark it in Broomfield, and we got it passed a few years ago, though we've never run an election yet with it because
Tom didn't run.
Yeah, we need 3 members in some district to run to start using it. Maybe next election.
Okay, how about Pat go next and then Frank Atwood?
I'm Pat Venturo, and if a little bell rings in my ear, I have to admit somebody. So, if there's a gap. And here comes my husband, Frank. We've both been in league for quite a while and on the voting methods team in Boulder County League for a number of years now. So we're still in a learning situation. I don't think you ever can stop with this issue. Learning, that is. And this is Frank.
Good evening. This is Frank, the other Frank, Frank Atwood with Approval Voting in Arapahoe County, and I'm eager to be part of the meeting. And thank you, Celeste, for hosting these.
Jen, and then Jesse.
Hi, I'm Jen Cleland. I'm in the Boulder County League and on the voting methods team. Also a math professor at CU Boulder, and I do academic work on redistricting and things related to elections.
Take it, it's my turn. Jesse Cuman, and I also started a group. Everybody's got a group. It's Best Democracy, and we promote proportional systems, also good governance and direct democracy. And I'm here in my role as language police.
Watch out.
I won't go into that right now. Thank you for hosting, Celeste. And I'm really glad to see Frank Atwood, both Franks. But it's always it's always nice. And thank you, Bob Marshall, for joining the call also, and everybody else. Thank you.
How about next Sharon and then Rep Marshall or whoever is using Rep Marshall's account?
Sorry, I'm on my iPad and the camera doesn't work so well. Sharon Flynn, I'm in Boulder County. I'm just interested in learning what this group is doing. I moved back to the US a couple of years ago after living in a parliamentary democracy in Australia, where preferential voting happens all the time. So I've been interested to see how this has progressed, how this can progress in Colorado and the US. Somewhat familiar with RCV too. That's a great group. So yeah, so I look forward to learning.
Thanks, Sharon. Rep Marshall, do you want to say hi?
As Bob Marshall, I'm the State House Rep for Highland Ranch and have some strong interest in election reform.
Thanks for joining us. Diana and then Peg.
I'm from Larimer County, and I don't expect to be a regular member of this group, but I'm gathering information through because I'm on the Larimer County Legislative Action Team, and I'm trying to relay information to our own committees about what's happening at the state level, and also anything having to do with elections. I'm a longtime election judge. So I'm interested in just to see on what you're going to do. So I'm here to learn.
Larimer County, well, Fort Collins has made some big changes recently with elections, changed their timing and changed to instant runoff voting. So yeah, lots going on there. Peg? And then Tony?
I'm a longtime member of the Larimer League, and I'm most active in the environmental group, but I just wanted to sit on your meeting tonight and see what was going on.
Peg, what's your last name?
LaPointe. It's
Okay.
capital P-O-I-N-T. I'm not quite sure why it's not showing up on my screen, except I have a new computer that I hardly know how to use.
I saw you on the list, but I didn't know if you were the same Peggy or Peg. Okay.
Yes, I am.
Tony, if you're there, do you want to say hi? And while we wait for you to come back, I'll just say my name is Celeste Landry, and I've been involved with voting methods since the end of 2010, I think it was 2011, when Fort Collins had an IRV, instant runoff voting adoption question on their ballot that did not pass, but we heard a presentation from Eric, I forget his last name.
Freed.
What's that?
Eric Freed.
Yes, Eric Freed, that's it. And I'm hooked. So here I am. And now Tony. You're muted, Tony.
I am terribly sorry. That is such an irritating thing to do. Tony Larson, League of Women Voters of Denver.
and very involved, former state president, etc. The face of the league to many people. Don't let her fool you. Okay, I'm going to go back to sharing the screen, unless there's something people need to do while we're all still here. Okay. Okay. So some upcoming events. Every month, Fair Vote Canada has a PR, meaning Proportional Representation 101 webinar. It's a half-hour presentation and then Q&A. And it's always the 15th of the month. So it's worth attending if you've never attended one. In February, we're going to have program planning for the local leagues, which is when we think about all the things we want to study and do. So there's a primary election reform study that's going on, so there'll be a report on that. And maybe we'll be ready for consensus questions. So that's moving along. And then in March, I know the Boulder County and Larimer County leagues are planning in-person screenings with follow-up discussion of Counted Out, which is a film about the importance of math literacy in today's world. So it's math and democracy. It's not, I mean, a lot of voting is about math, but this doesn't talk about voting so much, but it's still worth seeing, I think. Okay, here are two examples of election analysis that happened recently that people might be interested in. All of these slides are available in our folder, which is on the minutes slide that we already had, but we can go back to it if people want. DU Professor Seth Maskett, who I learned is at Vanderbilt on a sabbatical sort of thing. Colorado Public Radio's Megan Verlee, and then a UC Santa Barbara professor discussed last week the future of election reform. It was interesting. They mentioned the Irish elections, but they didn't mention that the Irish elections use a proportional form of RCV. So that was an oversight, I think. But it's an interesting panel to hear these experts discuss what they thought of the 2024 election. And then this other article talks about how much money was spent on election reform campaigns. And in Oregon, there was kind of a shocking figure. The ballot measure was to use instant runoff voting for lots of elections. And it had nothing to do with opening up, having an all-candidate primary or anything like that. It was just having instant runoff voting. And the pro side spent more than $9 million, and the anti side spent less than $1,400. And I don't know if there was a typo in the article, but that's what the article said. And it was rejected by voters 57% to 43%. So that was, the no side got a lot of bang for their buck, I guess. It was kind of a wave election. I think we can all pretty much agree. Our next meeting will be January 13th. It's usually at the third Monday, but the third Monday is MLK Day. So we're going to hold it the second Monday. It's already in the calendar at the State League's website. Okay, here's our agenda for today. And as I said at the beginning, if there's anything you want to add at any time, this is a very flexible agenda. So the meeting goes until 7 p.m. and we will be ending at 7 or earlier because there's another task force meeting that I know some of us are going to. So, so let's go ahead and talk about action items. There's no update on creating an online proportional approval voting option. I got an email from Ruth Grace Wong today, and she said they're still working on it. She's hoping to have it ready for program planning beginning of next year. So we'll get an update next month, I guess. Any questions on this? Proportional approval voting, you don't necessarily have to know what it is. Approval voting is when you have a ballot like the one that's here and you can vote for as many candidates as you support. Proportional approval voting is a multi-winner form, and it uses a special tabulation to make sure that the results are proportional.
I'm curious if Frank could unpack that for us.
No. I
Unpack in what way?
Well, if maybe he could, just so people are clear what the language is, what proportional approval voting is, some people might not understand that.
I don't think we want to get into the weeds on this, Jesse, because there's proportional approval voting, there's sequential proportional approval voting, there are at least 3 types of proportional approval voting, and there was a presentation that Neil and I did about it a few years back, and it's on the Boulder County League's website. So I think what we should do is when the software is ready, Ruth should give us a demo and we can talk about it a lot more then. Is that okay?
Sure. One thing that should be included, what the pros and cons of proportional approval voting are versus other types of proportional systems.
That sounds great to do when they do the presentation. Yeah. And if they don't mention those things, you should bring them up. Okay. Action item number 2 is a draft letter to the General Assembly, or a letter to the General Assembly. It's going to need approval, and a draft is written, and all the people on here have a copy of it. Neil has set up a Google Doc so people can make comments. The draft version basically asks the Colorado legislature to pass enabling legislation for 2 specific voting methods. One is approval voting. That's what the Littleton City Council has heard a lot about. Their letter to the General Assembly did not mention approval voting, but that's what they've heard a lot about. So, and then the Boulder City Council has talked about using proportional voting to elect their city council, but nobody can do it until the General Assembly passes some enabling legislation. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Longmont, there's a group that would like to use proportional single transferable vote. Tom and I met and to see if the league can ally with RCV for Colorado to work on this. And also Fair Vote is crafting enabling draft legislation for proportional single transferable vote. So we're hopeful that there's momentum. We're going to need a legislator to carry this. Often there's a big elections bill, so it could be tagged onto that. But if Rep. Marshall wants to speak up and say something about it, that'd be great. If this will come up again later, but if anybody else wants to be involved in this, writing this draft, let me know. Maybe I could ask Rep. Marshall a question right now about this. And the question is, who is the best person to address this letter to? I have some thoughts.
Well, probably the speaker and majority leader of the Senate and the Senate
Okay,
president.
Okay, those are two of the 5 names that are on there. That I also thought maybe the state affairs committee chairs in each of the chambers.
Yeah, you could do that.
And then I also thought Caleb Thornton, who is with the Secretary of State's office. He's like the legal rulemaking policy guy. Because I think we should have somebody from the Secretary of State's office involved in this. And we'd be happy to copy you on it if you'd like to be copied on it. So, okay. Anybody else have any comments they want to make about a letter to the General Assembly? The reason we are talking about those 2 particular methods, single transferable vote, is already authorized in State Statute 1-7-1003, but no county clerk will conduct an election unless the Secretary of State promulgates rules and procedures to do so. And the Secretary of State tends not to do that until the legislature makes them do that. They're kind of busy. It's not a priority unless they're forced to do it, usually. This is what happened with instant runoff voting when Boulder wanted to hold a mayoral contest. So this is why we're asking for single transferable vote to become a reality. It's on paper, but it's not yet a reality for Colorado. And then approval voting is so easy, you shouldn't need to do anything really to make it. It's easy to implement, easy to tally, easy to audit, but once again, the county clerks are very hesitant to do anything until they get the blessing of the Secretary of State. So that would be very easy to run an approval voting election, and it's just nice to have options besides our choose one plurality voting method. So
Celeste, Betsy has her hand up.
Great, Betsy.
So could you borrow the rules and regs from a different place that's already promulgated rules and regs and just start offering them to the Secretary of State or the legislature with the kind of theme that because it's allowed, the league wants to help the state move forward?
I think we can offer examples of legislation, like Jesse pointed out. California had SB 212, I think it was in 2019 or so. And that explains how single transferable vote works. But I don't think the problem is figuring out how it works for legislation. I think it's how is it going to work with the way we audit? How is it going to work with the fact that 62 counties use Dominion and 2 use Clear Ballot, or around maybe a couple hand count. I don't remember exactly, but the Secretary of State's very proprietary about this stuff, so we can offer help, and we will. Like Fair Vote has already written draft legislation, but we'll try. Good question. We don't want to reinvent the wheel if we don't have to, but sometimes if you feel proprietary, you want to do that. Okay. Let's go ahead to the next agenda item. So, we've talked a lot about proportional representation. I thought we might show 1 or 2 videos here. So, here is a 2.5-minute video. Oh, and they use Canadian terms.
Let's talk about voting systems. Canada uses first past the post. This means that a party with less than 40% of the vote can get 60% of the seats and all the power in Parliament. But there are other ways of electing parliaments. The most widely used type of electoral system around the world is proportional representation. In proportional systems, if 40% of people vote for one party, that party wins about 40% of the seats. Let's use the Big Lake region to compare the 2 kinds of voting systems. Currently, under first past the post, the region is split into 6 ridings, with 1 MP elected per riding. The most popular party in the Big Lake area is the Moose Party. About half of the people tend to vote Moose. Since Moose supporters make up the largest percentage of voters in each riding, the Moose Party wins all the seats. With proportional representation, votes from the Big Lake region are considered collectively, and a team of local MPs is elected, reflecting the percentage of votes each party receives. The Moose Party, supported by half the Big Lake residents, would win half the seats. Puffin Party supporters, about 1/3 of the voters, would elect 2 Puffin MPs. And finally, with 1/6 of voter support, the most popular Beaver candidate would win the last seat. So, unlike first past the post, where only Moose MPs are elected, the proportional system means there is a broader range of voters' viewpoints represented, not just those of the biggest group. We would keep the best features from our current system, like local MPs elected by name, not just party, and the most popular candidates will be elected. 40% of the vote means 40% of the seats, a much fairer, proportional voting system for everyone. The overall results in Parliament would reflect a broader scope of viewpoints in every region, with almost every voter having an MP they helped elect. To learn more about how to improve our voting system, visit fairvote.ca.
Okay. Any questions or comments about that video? Was it worth watching? It was only 2.5 minutes. I have some more videos, so let's go to the next one. And oh, what happened here? Oh, that was video. Oh, here's video number 2. This one is about twice as long, and it's from Washington State. And it talks about moving from a single winner to PR elections, kind of like that one did, but there's more going on.
Most of us in Washington want better for our state, but we're stuck. We want summers with clean, smoke-free air. We want to be able to buy a home someday, and we want to see our tax dollars work for us instead of a handful of billionaires. So why can't we? It comes down to this. When we the people don't have fair representation, we the people don't get to call the shots. In Washington, more than 1/3 of us are renters, but in the legislature, landlords and people with multiple homes vastly outnumber renters. And in 2023, out of more than 130 elected county commissioners and council members in our state, only 3 are people of color. For too long, we have been stuck in a democratic system that thrives on conflict and was designed to keep a representative government out of our reach. But the good news is there are common sense, proven ways to make our democracy better. Ones that give us more freedom to express ourselves and result in a government that's a more accurate reflection of who we are. It helps to understand the root issues in our voting systems that are keeping us stuck. There's basically 3 problems. Problem 1, some of the people get all of the representation. Right now, we have a system called winner-take-all elections. That means If one group has a tiny majority in their district, say 51% of the vote, they get 100% of the representation. The other 49% are left with nothing. Now, this definitely hurts representation of people of color, but it's about more than race. Any group that's even a slight minority in their district, whether because of their political ideology, education level, homeownership status, or many other things, might have no say at all about who represents them. A fair democracy should strive to have proportional representation, meaning that groups of voters can elect a share of political representatives that are in proportion to their share of the population. Problem 2, negative campaigning is the only way to win. In our winner-take-all system, for a candidate to get any support at all, he needs to get voters to think that he is the one and only choice for them. He has to fight tooth and nail to take out the other candidate, because any vote for them is a vote against him. This is so sad because there might be other candidates that he has a lot in common with, who share a lot of his values. But in a winner-take-all system, he has to undermine them in order to get any support. And in doing so, he's splitting up the vote of like-minded people in his community so that he and the candidates most similar to him are actually less likely to win. Problem 3, we get stuck choosing between the lesser of two evils. I think we've all experienced this. You want to vote for your favorite candidate, but you're worried they won't get enough support to win. Meanwhile, there's a really, really bad candidate running, and you definitely don't want them to win. So you feel like you have to vote for this other candidate who you think has a shot at winning, someone who's fine, you can tolerate them, but they're not who you actually wanted. Our winner-takes-all system pressures us into voting for disappointing candidates instead of voting our values. We're so used to this winner-takes-all system and its problems that we've accepted that this is just the way democracy works. But this isn't our only option. There are other voting systems out there. Here's a couple of proven solutions we believe in. Ranked choice voting is a system where you get to rank your options so that you can vote for your favorite candidate. But if they don't win, your vote will be transferred to a backup option. And when you use ranked choice voting to elect multiple representatives for one district, people who are in the minority can still get some representation in proportion to their share of the population. Plus, these changes make campaigns more positive along the way. Do you want to learn more about these solutions and how we can make them a reality together? Get connected to Washington for Equitable Representation at representingwa.org.
Okay.
Celeste,
Yes.
this is Frank Atwood.
Yes.
I guess one of my questions with regards to proportional representation is, what do we think the threshold for minimizing saboteurs should be? If the question makes sense to people.
Right. So
And-
for instance, if there are 100 people and you all elect them in one election, if you get 1% of the vote, you should get elected out of, if there are 100 people. So you might not want to elect somebody if they only get 1%. Does anybody else want to answer that question? I mean, I could say more, but we have a lot of
And-
experts here.
And sort of, I assume that the percentage would be either 5 or 10%, maybe as high as 15 in my mind, but then rumor has it that I've been accused of being a reactionary. And so I just want the thought out there if anybody wants to touch it. Jesse? Okay. Thank you, Celeste.
So Denmark has a 2% threshold, and they average 13.5 members per district, and they have 12 parties elected. So I don't know if we want to, what the target would be, but you can design the system to get the results that you want. And if you want to have a lot of diversity, if you want 12 parties, then you can just copy what Denmark does. If you want fewer parties, then you raise the threshold and you have fewer members per district. Those are the two key variables.
Okay, thank you.
The number of representatives per district, per multi-member district is called the magnitude. And the U.S. Fair Representation Act prefers magnitude 5. So 5 representatives per district, all elected at one time.
They're promoting 3 members per district, actually.
Well, they like 3 or 5. They like an odd number. But if they've got, I always thought it was 5, unless they had 3 left over. So like for Colorado, we have 8 members of the U.S. House. 5 would be elected in one district and 3 would be elected in the other under the U.S. Fair Representation Act. But an example, Cambridge, Massachusetts elects 9 members of their city council in one election. Every 2 years, they elect 9 people using single transferable vote. In the same election, the school committee elects 6 people using single transferable vote. And they've been doing this since 1941, and they call it PR, for proportional representation. So, yeah. Did we answer your question, kind of?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay. So there are at least 4 main types of proportional representation, and this website at the top of this slide is quite good, and that's where this graphic came from. So for type 1, you vote for a candidate, and your candidate votes counts for both your candidate and your party. So if you vote for John Jay, that's a Federalist, and they would count the number of votes John Jay got, count the number of votes every single candidate got, plus they count how many people voted for Federalists, how many people voted for anti-Federalists, how many people voted for independents. If 50% of the people vote for Federalists, then half the seats should go to the Federalists. If you're electing 4 people, then you look and see who got the most votes.
Most of us in Washington want better for our state.
Sorry about that.
If Federalists get 2 seats, you see which 2 Federalists got the highest number of votes, and those 2 get the seats. And then say the other 2 each got 25% of the vote, you'd get the 1 person from each of these lists to fill the other 2 seats. So that's type 1, open seat, open, and then closed, you just vote for the party, a closed party list, you just vote for the party. And this is what they use in the West Bank in Nablus. I went to visit with the Boulder Nablus Sister City group, and I met somebody who was like an independent candidate, and he was number 1 on the independent list, but the independents didn't even get enough people for him to be elected. So only the other 2 main parties got elected, and they just do it according to the list. If 60% is Federalists and 20% is anti-Federalists, and you got 5 seats, you take the first 3 people on the Federalist list and the first 2 people on the anti-Federalist to fill your 5 seats. So any questions on these 2 party lists, open list and closed list? These are, as you can see, very party based. So the third one is is interesting because you can vote for a candidate and you can vote for a party. So this is used in Germany, for instance. And if you look at a place like a very Republican place like the 4th Congressional District, which Lauren Boebert will be representing pretty soon, if if you are a Democrat and you don't like Lauren Boebert, you might vote for the Republican who's most likely to beat her in the district ballot, the candidate ballot, but for the party ballot, you could vote for the Democrat. So this one's quite intriguing to me, at least. But the way it calculates out, they have to leave some seats to fill according to the party ratio. Because the candidates don't always line up with the parties in a mixed member system. So these are not methods that are discussed in the US. The US seems to like to think about candidates more and not parties. We're very proud of voting for the person, not the party. And single transferable vote, which we have mentioned already, is not a party-based system. And this is what's used in Cambridge, Massachusetts. This is what was just used for the first time in Portland, Oregon. This is what was used in Boulder from 1917 to 1947. And in Cambridge, they have as many rankings. They used to have as many rankings as there were candidates. So when I was living there for a month in 2017 during election season, they had 26 columns, and they would have a ruler at the precinct polling place so that you would try to avoid marking two candidates number two. And they also would run your ballot through the scanner. And if it had an error, they gave you a new ballot you could fill out. And if that one had a mistake, they gave you a third ballot, but that was your last chance. So the way this works is your first choice is always counted. And if your first choice is eliminated, then your vote transfers to your second choice. Suppose your second choice is elected, but gets more than the number of votes needed. And we'll talk about how many votes are needed. They have a surplus over the number of votes. Then those surplus votes, that surplus fraction of each person's vote can go to the third choice. So even though it's a single vote, it may end up supporting more than one candidate. So I'd like to show you two short videos on how single transferable vote works. And as we said earlier, this is authorized in our Colorado statutes, but we have no enabling legislation for this. So a couple things about it. It's the only proportional voting method in Colorado law. And we're waiting for it to be able to be used by the county clerks. A city can do it, but cities don't want to run elections on their own. They like the experts, the county clerks, to run elections. Comparing it with the party list, the first three methods that we saw, this STV is candidate-based rather than party-based. It also has a more complex tabulation because there are fractions involved with the surplus transfer. It's often called proportional RCV. Jesse hates this name, so don't call it proportional RCV around him. Okay, let's watch a little video. This is 4 minutes long. There are two parties, the purple party and the orange party. The purple party has three candidates, plum, violet, and lavender. The orange party has two candidates, rust and apricot. It's a multi-winner election, and there'll be some bar graphs. They'll be electing three candidates, and you'll see what happens with the bar graphs, but they won't be they won't show, the next film after this one will show more.
Our traditional winner-take-all elections polarize our politics, reward gerrymandering, and leave millions of Americans without real representation. The solution to these problems is proportional ranked choice voting. Proportional ranked choice voting is the gold standard for electing legislators from City Council to the House of Representatives. Each district or community is represented by several members instead of just one, and those members are elected in proportion to their share of votes cast. Under this system, which is sometimes called the single transferable vote, nearly all voters help elect a candidate they support, a truly representative democracy. Here's how it works. First, voters fill out their ballots. Voters can rank candidates in order of preference. First, second, third, and so on. Voters can rank as many candidates as they want, but as we'll see, ranking gives our votes more power. Imagine a race between members of a purple party and an orange party. Let's say 5 candidates are competing for 3 seats. A candidate needs more than 25% of votes, even just one single vote more, to win a seat. The first choice votes are tallied. If we stopped here and elected the candidates with the most votes, the results are not representative. Orange would win 2 of the 3 seats, despite their candidates earning just 40% of the vote. That's why we need a proportional system. In round 1 with proportional RCV, Plum receives 35% of votes and wins a seat. No other candidates crossed the threshold in this round. Plum won a seat and got more votes than she needed, a surplus of votes. In round 2, people who voted for Plum have the surplus fraction of their vote count for their second choice candidate. This way, every vote is used in a way that is fair and has the greatest impact on the outcome. No ballots are wasted on candidates that have already surpassed the threshold, and everyone's vote counts the same. See how Plum's surplus votes, in dark purple, are distributed to voters' second choices, Rust, Violet, and Lavender. Most Plum voters ranked another purple candidate second, but some voters crossed party lines and ranked Rust. Rust reaches the threshold and wins the second seat. In round 3, we eliminate the last place candidate. Eliminating candidates is always a last resort. This only happens when there are seats to fill, but no surplus to transfer. Lavender is eliminated. People who voted for Lavender have their vote count for their second choice candidate. See how Lavender voters' second choices in light purple now mostly count for Violet. Now Violet has reached 25%. Plum, Rust, and Violet are elected. Remember the purple party and the orange party? If we look at the first round of tallied votes, 60% of voters chose a purple party candidate, and 40% chose an orange party candidate. Proportional ranked choice voting preserved the purple party's majority by awarding them 2 seats, but also fairly awarded 1 seat to the orange party. Now the winners more accurately reflect the voters. Under our current single winner elections, purple would win, there would be only 1 representative, and orange voters wouldn't have anyone in office to represent them. Proportional ranked choice voting produces better results for all of us, whether we consider ourselves red, blue, purple, orange, or something else. For more information on proportional ranked choice voting, visit fairvote.org.
Okay. Any comments on that video?
There's incorrect information in the video. They say it's sometimes called single transferable vote. It's always called single transferable vote in the rest of the world. FairVote made up this term as a result of criticism that they were conflating RCV, ranked choice voting, and instant runoff voting. So they came up with a new term. It's ridiculous that what they're saying is basically another deception.
And we'll put in the chat a link to our What is RCV Anyway article, because we talk about the fact that RCV is a group of voting methods, not all ranked voting methods, but a group of voting methods. And we got that article published in, this is the Boulder County League. We got that article published in Fulcrum. So I'll try, I'm going to make a note to write that because I can't do it right now. If somebody else knows where that article is and can put it in the chat, that's great. But
I just don't think we should be propagating misinformation. That's all.
Okay. Tom may have some comments in response to that or not. I don't know. I'm not sure this is the right place to get into all those details, but let's go on and see the next video, which is a classic. It's from around 2012, and it's called How Instant Runoff Voting Works 2.0. So as you say, Jesse, the name is not correct. This is really single transferable vote because it's multiple winners and it uses a proportional tabulation. So an interesting thing about this one is it shows the actual surplus fraction transfer. It shows exhausted ballots, which the other video did not mention, and it even shows a winner that didn't make threshold but still wins. So let's look at this one now. If I can, there we go.
Vote for your favorite colors.
The instant runoff way.
Now with fractions. We already showed you how instant runoff elections work when there's only one winner.
But when there's more than one winner, it's a little more complicated.
We have 5 colors to choose from, and we're going to end up with 3 winners.
To start, each voter chooses a favorite color, a second choice, and a third.
All right, purple is my first choice, yellow comes in second, and I'll put blue in third place.
Now we need a scoreboard. There were 36 votes cast. There will be 3 winners.
In order for a color to win, it needs more than a quarter of the vote. That's because if a color gets that much, then it's mathematically impossible for it to lose.
36 divided by 4 is 9, and we need just over that.
So plus 1 is 10.
10 votes is the finish line.
Make it there, and you're one of the 3 winners.
So let's count the votes.
No one's reached the finish line yet. That means it's time for round 2.
And orange got the fewest votes, so it's out.
Everyone who voted for orange first now gets their second choice.
Purple reached the finish line.
In fact, purple has more votes than it needs.
That means each purple voter can take back a fraction of their vote and still leave purple with enough to win.
Under instant runoff rules, that's exactly what they get to do.
Purple has 2 votes to spare.
And that gets divided among the 12 purple voters.
So each of them gets 1/6 of their vote back.
And that little piece will go to their next choice.
Now blue has reached the finish line.
No votes to spare.
So no more fractions. Green is in last place. You know the drill.
Most of these votes are for colors that have already won or are already out.
We call those ballots exhausted.
Yellow didn't quite make it to the finish line, but there's no one else left.
So we have our 3 winners.
The instant runoff way.
So Celeste?
Yes.
Since there are 36 voters and 3 seats, why 25% versus 33, they're 34%?
It's not actually 25%, it's just past 25%. So 25% of 36 is 12. And you could have 4 winners. If 4 winners could each, wait, I said that wrong. 36 divided by 4 is 9. You could have 4 winners if everyone gets 9. So you can't have it be 25%. You have to be more than 25. So 10 is how you do it if you're doing whole numbers. So then if one candidate gets 10 votes, another candidate gets 10 votes, another candidate gets 10 votes, that's 30 votes. There are only 6 left over. You can't have a 4th winner. So that's why it's just over, because a 4th, you could divide it 36 by 4, and then you'd have 4 winners, but you don't want 4 winners. So it has to be over 25%.
So Celeste, I think her question is why the threshold is not 12. So divide. So think about it this way. In our standard elections, where we want to elect one person, how much of the vote do you need? You need half plus a little more, right? So now say I wanted to elect 2 people. I don't need a half plus a little more, because 2 people can't possibly get a half plus a little more. So I need a 1/3 plus a little more to elect 2. And to elect 3, I need a 4th plus a little more. So it's always, you need a little more than 1 divided by 1 more than the number of seats, because that's the minimum where you can't have more than, if I require a little more than 1/4, I can't have more than 3 people get that much. So that's the right amount to require if I want 3 winners.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jen. This will come up, that fraction that Jen was talking about. Okay, I was going to move on to expected Colorado legislation, but we will end up coming back to proportional representation in the discussion on county commissioner elections. But if people have burning questions right now, you should ask them. Or if there's something you just want to know, you can ask that too. Okay, so let's talk about vacancies. The issue with vacancies, it's become a hot issue lately because a lot of the current people in the state legislature have gotten their position through a vacancy committee, which is usually, lately it's been about 40 people on average, choosing the elected representative for 80,000 people or 120,000 people or some large number of people, but 40 people is not very many. So there's been a lot of disgruntled talk, and in particular, Chris Hansen and Janet Buckner, Democratic state senators, just got reelected to a 4-year term and then promptly announced that they are not going to serve. They'll show up for the first day of office and then they will resign. And so we expect 2 vacancy committees for those. And since it's a 4-year term, but the vacancy committee can only fill it for 2 years. And then there'll be a special election in November of 2026 to have an election to fill the rest of the last 2 years of that term. So it gets more complicated because the state Senate vacancy might be filled by a sitting state representative, in which case now there's a vacancy for that state rep seat. So then there would be another vacancy committee to fill the state rep's seat. So this cascades and it makes people unhappy, as you can imagine. And then to make things even worse, for instance, Chris Hansen has already stated who he wants to fill the seat he is vacating, and that is a state rep-elect. And Chris Hansen has also been audacious enough to state who he thinks should fill that state rep-elect's seat, which really looks like it's a really bad look, I think. So anyway, this is a big topic of discussion. So let's talk about Bob Marshall. If you want to correct anything I say, please do. Last year, House Concurrent Resolution 24-1004, HCR 24-1004, was an effort to reform the process of vacancies. It applied only to state reps and state senators. It was a constitutional amendment. It would have been referred to the voters, and then on the ballot, it would have needed 55% of the vote to change the Constitution. And I was reading the language and I'm a little confused. An appointed legislator cannot be a senator or a representative for the term following that person's appointment. I think, correct me, I think, Rep Marshall, you mean for the same office, correct? So if I'm a state rep, I could run to be a state senator. If I got appointed to a state rep position, I could run to be a state senator in the next term. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And that's why I highlighted this is the language in small print at the bottom, and I highlighted for that office. So that's, I wasn't sure if a different chamber or district mattered. I think an interesting thing on this is after redistricting, like House District 13 became House District 49. So if you got appointed to House District 13, like Casey Becker did, and then it got redistricted to House District 49. Could Casey Becker have run again? I don't think it actually worked out that way for her years, but you could imagine. So that might be something to make sure is works the way you want it to work. My concern with this proposal is that, to me, it punishes the person who replaces the legislator. It should punish, I think people are unhappy with the person who's vacating the seat. And so if there's something we can do.
No punishment involved either way. And the people that are taking the seats are almost as guilty as the one giving them up, because it's all being manipulated. And it's not a punishment for anyone taking the seat. If they want to run for the seat, they run in the regular general election, and it preserves the expectations of all the voters and all the candidates that you would run for the seat. You wouldn't just get appointed into it. So there's no punishment, because no one should ever expect that a vacancy should happen. That should be very abnormal. That is not the expectation. The expectation is you should go through a normal electoral process and run in the general election. Although I've heard this, oh, well, you're trying to punish the person who's there, or it's not fair to them. It's like, well, then don't accept the vacancy appointment. Run in the general election like you should expect. So it's not a punishment at all.
Another, I don't know if anybody else wants to address that issue. I have another comment, which is that if somebody can't be a long-term, can't run for the next term, then you'll get a different sort of person being the legislator, and that person might not be as dedicated, might not be as qualified, might not be as good a legislator as the constituents deserve. I mean, I do think there's a problem with the vacancy committee situation as it is, but that's just another comment I heard a state rep tell me that you might get a strange
Yeah, see, they talk out of both sides of their mouth because there's so many people say, well, the vacancy appointees are so good because we have all the people who are so involved making the choice. Well, if that's the case, yes, you are going to get a different cross section of people that would step forward for the vacancy. The people who want to serve long term, they will run in the general election like they should. They shouldn't be coming in through the side door. They should be running in the general election like anyone else. So you will get a different cross section of people. You'll probably get like leg aides, former legislators. The vacancy committee, it's not a static analysis thing. When the rules change, people will play the game differently. There will be different people that'll show up that are planning on only sticking around for 6 to 12 months. And yes, there'll probably even be quite a few that after the session, because we only have 120-day sessions. So if it comes vacant on May 31 and the general elections that year, they might just appoint someone for a sinecure position, the party, just like they did with former Minority Leader McKean's wife. They appointed her for 2 months so she could keep his salary and keep his benefits, and then did another vacancy appointment to bring Weinberg in. So people will react differently when the rules change. So you can't just say, look through it through the prism of, well, how would they react now? Because they will change. And we've been doing these vacancy committees for at least 50 years, because I found a Colorado Supreme Court case on the subject from the early 70s. It's only become an issue in the last 20. If it was just 4 to 6 people in the legislature that were vacancy appointments, no one would bat an eye, which they didn't for at least 30 years and probably much, much longer. But by my research, it seems it's been an unintended consequence of having put term limits in the mid-90s. So now everyone has hard dates of when they have to leave, which just has exponentially increased the incentive to manipulate the system as they go out the door. So now we got Hansen and Van Winkle, who both got appointed to their Senate seats, are going to have vacancy appointees appointed to replace them. It's becoming a self-perpetuating cycle. And I've been looking at this for a year, and last time I had 2 colleagues who were like, well, I don't like how you're doing it. It definitely needs to be changed. They'd both come to me this time and said, Bob, you're absolutely right. This is the only way we can do it. Because at the end of the day, if you really want true reform, because the problem is putting an incumbent into that position, and then they're the incumbent with the inside track, and it becomes a self-perpetuating cycle. You have to break the incumbency issue. And the only way to do that is special elections or the term limit, and saying, whoever is going to be the party selected incumbent won't be able to run for that seat. Special elections do have problems. It's a way to solve the problem, but it does have the problems. If we only have a 120-day session, it takes at least 60 to 90 days to run a fair, proper election. So if somebody comes vacant, if you got a seat comes vacant somewhere in the middle of session, you could have districts with no representation during the only period of the year that matters. And they're also expensive. So they have those 2 knocks against them. The vacancy committees, the one thing they are fast, because within 10 days of the resignation or 10 days of the seat coming open, there are a lot of people who would say, well, we ought to just restrict when you can resign and stuff. It's like, well, the problem is these vacancies, it wasn't meant just for people resigning because now they're manipulating. It's also, if the person drops dead, it's like, what are you going to tell them when they can't die? Or if they become very sick, or if they have true family issues, they may need to leave and resign. So vacancies are going to happen. The question is, are we going to continue to tolerate a system where a group of insiders, and you say, yeah, the average is about 40, but that means there's quite a lot less than 40. I think Perry Will was, I think it was like a 9-8 decision. So 9 people decided who was going to represent 145,000 people on the Western Slope.
Since Dave Williams and Chris Degree Kennedy's bill passed, I think it was like House Bill 21-1044 or something like that. The smallest vacancy committee has been 9. But before that, I think there was one that was only 6.
Well,
So-
what their bill, and that's my concern too, is there's a move afoot right now to undermine this effort, because it's a true reform effort. And there's people who just want to do window dressing and pretend we're doing reform to get the heat off, but not give up the power that the parties have of these insiders. that bill that was run, it didn't correct the issue, obviously, because we still got the problem that they ran. But their bill, at least, you didn't even need a quorum. People could show up and they only have a third of the people who are even qualified to vote, and they'd vote.
It's
and
not
put
true
them
that you
in.
didn't need a quorum, because I've run a vacancy committee. You need it, if the quorum was 50%, and you did need a quorum, but 50% is only half the people. And people show up for vacancy committees because you are powerful. You're one of 40 people, say, who get to pick the replacement officer. So it's a powerful job. So Rep Marshall and I are meeting tomorrow. I'm very excited to talk about some of these ideas, and we only have 20 minutes left in this meeting. So let's continue some of these discussions tomorrow, Rep Marshall, and let me briefly show some alternatives to the House concurrent resolution you're proposing. So these are 3 mutually exclusive alternatives, and they only apply to the situation where a vacancy happens because an elected official gets elected to a different office. So a simple little thing is on the ballot for the office that they're seeking. So Kevin Van Winkle just got elected county commissioner. If on that ballot, there could have been a little warning statement saying, if Kevin Van Winkle gets elected, that will trigger a vacancy committee to replace him as state senator. So that's a very simple thing. Probably not worth a ballot referendum. And it's not a constitutional change, so that could happen, whatever. Here's a very interesting one. Why not require the office holder to resign the current office before seeking a different one, or, contemporaneously with seeking the different office? So if Kevin Van Winkle wants to run for county commissioner, maybe he should resign as a state senator. If Chris Hansen wants to run for mayor of Denver, maybe he should resign as state senator. I mean, that is putting the onus on the person who's creating the vacancy. And then you can have a regular election, at least sometimes, maybe not mayor of Denver. It's a little complicated, but
so when Michael Bennett ran for president, he should have resigned from the Senate.
I think that if he got the nomination, yes, he should resign. But he never got that far. And then, but the president is totally different, so I don't even want to include that in this. And then a third option is if somebody is running, like Chris Hansen is running for mayor of Denver, there could be a simultaneous election to fill his state Senate seat if he's elected mayor. That could be confusing for voters. I think of all of these, the simplest thing is to require the office holder to resign their current seat. We right now do not let any office holders, we don't let anybody be a candidate for two offices at the same time. So it might not be that hard to require an office holder to resign a current office before seeking a different office. So those are
none of these proposals, though, go to the core issue. So right now, at this moment,
you haven't heard the fourth.
All right, but none of these 3. Let me be blunt.
Right,
None of
that's
these
true.
3
That's true.
address the issue.
That's true. They only address the case where somebody is seeking a different office, and that by getting that different office, they're going to create a vacancy. So here's another alternative that can be combined with those other 3 alternatives. And in this case, the vacancy committee would make a temporary appointment until the next election, which would usually be November of an odd year. It doesn't have to be, but it would just be, instead of having the person appointed by the vacancy committee be a temporary up to 2-year appointment, it would be a 1-year appointment, and they'd have to run for election pretty soon. So.
Well, and again, that still doesn't get to the, because you're still asking the voters to ratify the decision of these party insiders.
Why
rather than-
ratify? It's not ratify if more than one person runs.
No, it's still ratifying it because they're the incumbent. Anytime an incumbent's running, it's a ratification on their term.
I have seen in Boulder County 2 incumbents lose their re-election bid. So it's not. I mean, if the incumbent's doing a good job, maybe you want to ratify it. But if the incumbent's doing a bad job, boot him out.
But I'm just saying this does not take care of what the issue is, which is the incumbency problem. It's not, and both of my colleagues that were totally against it last time have come to that conclusion. Lorena Garcia and Rep. Soper, who are now going to be, on board with it. The people that are still trying to undermine it keep trying to keep the incumbent in the seat, so that the party power still gets to control the levers of power. I mean, why are people having such a hard time accepting a free and open election rather than having, because Hansen, we're going to have appointees put into Hansen's seat and Van Winkle's seat. And again, they were both appointed to begin with too. And you could say, well, they could lose in a primary. Well, yeah, that's, good in theory, but again, the incumbency just has so much power.
We can talk about this more tomorrow, because I look forward to that conversation. Okay, Rep. Marshall, you have another bill about county commissioner elections that you ran last year called HB 24. 24 is for the year, everybody, -1177, and it applied to large population counties. I think it was statutory and home rule counties, but not city counties. And it required 5 commissioners, and it required at least 3 of the 5 commissioners be elected by a district. And this year you said that you want to give the voters a choice between RCV and all district representation. I'm not exactly sure what that means, the choice between RCV and all district representation.
Yeah, well, I may have to back off even the RCV because everyone kicks back on that already. I mean, I know you all keep wanting to push it, but everyone here in Douglas County said you put that before us and nobody's going to support it. But I'm like, well, it's still a choice. The big thing is to try and get rid of these at-large elections. They are notorious for keeping down a political minority. It doesn't matter who the political minority is. Unfortunately, in most of American history, it's been a racial political minority. So the DOJ wiped them out almost all throughout the United States in the 1980s under the Voting Rights Act, because for 100 years in these southern and Midwestern counties, on school board and county and city council elections, everyone would be elected at large, and it would lock out the racial political minorities. Colorado flew under the radar because we didn't have a racial political minority during that time frame that was being locked out of local government. So the voting rights experts on the East Coast are shocked we even have these things still. The problems that we see were showing up, though, back then are starting to show up in Weld County and Adams County. Weld County, of course, is in the lawsuit because they're trying to gerrymander out the Latino minority there. And Adams County has 5 commissioners elected at large, and they're all Democrats, but there's already people getting a little concerned in a Voting Rights Act. A voting rights expert was saying we are on a collision course in Adams County where a rising Latino minority is going to be locked out. And it's not just, racial minorities. Kyle Brown backed my bill because he said Eastern Boulder County is locked out in Boulder County. Their commissioner may have to live in Eastern Boulder County, but they respond only to the city of Boulder. And Rep. Story was in favor of my bill too, because same issue. She represents Western Jefferson County, and she's like, our mountain areas are totally locked out because all the commissioners are elected at large and only listen to what goes on in the suburbs. And it came to my attention because Highlands Ranch makes up 28% of the population, with Lone Tree of Douglas County. We're integrated with Denver. There's no question we're a part of Denver. Rest of the county doesn't want to be a part of Denver, and so they vote and act like that. And our commissioner may live here, but she responds to the rest of the county. So our interests are totally ignored. And again, it's interests. It's not just a political thing. So
Right.
unfortunately, all our the Democratic commissioners in Larimer, Adams, Boulder, and Jefferson County are the ones who just absolutely killed it because they just came down with so much pressure on the reps to vote against it. So it's a good governance 101 thing against pure power politics at the end of the day. But having 3 commissioners elected at large in these large counties mean Jefferson County can have 2, not 3, because all you need is 2, and you can lock out the 3rd, which has happened in Douglas County. 2 people can run a county of 600,000 people and control $1 billion budget with pretty much no checks and balances, which makes no sense whatsoever.
So Rep. Marshall, we have an expert on the Voting Rights Act here and on gerrymandering and redistricting and all that. So I think let's advance to a few more slides, and Jen, pipe up whenever you want to. I wanted to say here that proportional representation is a response to the Voting Rights Act that is recognized, is acceptable. And in terms of changes to the bill, I think it would be too hard to change from a 4-year term. I think continuing to elect 3 commissioners in small population statutory counties is fine. Some local leagues have positions in favor of 5 commissioners in large population counties, so that I think the league would probably support 5 commissioners in large population counties. And right now, 2 commissioners are elected 1 year and the remaining commissioners are elected 2 years later. And I don't see any change that we should necessarily propose to that if we want anything to pass the legislature. I know Jesse Cuman would like many more commissioners than 5, but I don't know if that's realistic at this point. And then the reason to use a proportional voting method is because at-large block voting, which is what we use now, well, actually we use at-large choose one voting. It can violate the Voting Rights Act. And another problem with single winner districts is that they may be subject to gerrymandering. They're winner take all, and they do not allow for representation of dispersed communities. So Barb Winery, who was one of the plaintiffs on that Weld County case, was going to attend today, but she ended up with a conflict. So that case was heard this past week, I believe, and we'll see what happens with it. So if we were to use proportional representation, there's a way to deal with the party assemblies, there's a way to deal with the party primaries, and it's very straightforward. But then there are 2 alternatives that that I see as possible for electing county commissioners using a proportional representation. One is using single transferable vote, which we've been talking about. And in the second small bullet point here, you can see that fraction where you need more than 1/4 of the vote. If you are electing 3, you need more than 1/4 of the vote to win a seat, for instance. This just talks a little bit about how it would work. Here's if you wanted to use open party list, which we could, because everybody has a party label. It might be unaffiliated, but everybody has a party label in a county commissioner election because it is a partisan election. So that's what I wanted to say. Jen, would you address some of the issues about racial?
I mean, I think everything Rep. Marshall said makes sense. Rep. Marshall, you sound very well informed about this, which is great. The Voting Rights Act has a very high threshold for bringing a lawsuit. It only applies to racial and language minorities. It doesn't do anything about partisan disproportionality. It's not even clear how long the current Voting Rights Act is going to survive the current Supreme Court. So, I mean, there's a lot there. I mean, that said, yeah, proportional representation is probably the best possible remedy, but the parties don't like it, particularly in counties where there's single party control. And you would probably have to win a lawsuit in order to get something like that. Implemented over the objections of the parties, I suspect.
But I don't know if the league, we support proportional representation. So just because one thing is feasible and another is not, I don't know if that means we can support district elections if proportional representation is a possibility, even if it's not feasible. So
I mean, I don't know how, I don't know what the league would say. I mean, I think the league supports better voting methods. And in cases where a minority population is geographically concentrated and you can draw them a district, that is an improvement over at large. And that is the traditional remedy that courts apply in Voting Rights Act cases. When jurisdictions are sued over at large elections that disenfranchise minority voters. I'm not aware of courts having actually imposed proportional representation as a remedy. It's a high bar.
They've done semi-proportional representation with cumulative voting in multiple southern states. Cumulative voting is so easy to implement and tally and probably audit that I think that's a possibility, but that's not as good as full proportional representation because you have wasted votes.
Well, and again, they're looking at putting a Voting Rights Act through for Colorado, but even in that case, the only counties that may be implicated may be Weld and Adams at some point in the future. That's so, again, as I mentioned, you can make the case that we do have geographic interests. Like I said, Highlands Ranch as a suburb is totally different county. The farming areas in eastern Boulder County are totally distinct from the rest of Boulder, and they're locked out. And the mountain areas of Jefferson County are locked out. So again, you may not consider full district voting to be the perfect solution, but it's a better solution, especially over totally at large for everyone, because it's also an anti-corruption piece, because we've had huge issues down here with 2 commissioners locking out the third and the 2 running everything. And it makes it exponentially harder to keep, even if you only have 3, 5's better because it's an anti-corruption element. But even if you only have 3, if they all have the same constituency, it's easier to keep an alliance. If they're actually representing different constituencies, it's very difficult to keep an alliance together because they have to represent the interests of their voters to stay elected.
I'm going to be very interested to hear how the Colorado Supreme Court decides the redistricting lawsuit against Weld County, where Weld County is trying not to follow the requirements of amendments Y and Z. If that lawsuit
It's not amendments Y and Z, I think it's a HB 1047. They were trying to copy amendments Y and Z. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, apologies for the misstatement, but if that lawsuit is successful, then that makes districts look more appealing if the districts have to be drawn by a fair process. Still not everything that proportional representation would be, but probably more achievable.
So it's almost 7 o'clock. Rep Marshall, I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. I'm going to put the one last
You're muted. You're muted. Celeste, you muted yourself. Thank you.
So people can talk while I finish this up, but I think the meeting's basically over for now, and I appreciate everybody attending. Beth, good to see you here. I hope you made a lot of the meeting.
Most of the meeting. I had another meeting that I abandoned to come to this, so tried to split. I missed the beginning, sorry.
Do you want me to stop the recording now?
Sure, I'm about to. Right after I put this last video in the chat, then stop the recording. Okay, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Interesting. Lots to think about.
There's no shortage of things